Hello, welcome to the April 16th, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you are running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. If you could specify which operating system, whether you're running a Mac or PC, or also if you could specify, let me just get my gain structure. Also, if you could specify which, if you're running version 11, 12, 13, etc., that information would be helpful. When asking questions, if you don't see an immediate response to your questions, if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would expedite the whole process and speed it up so we can get through more questions. And if you want it, we should have an index of all topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. So you could look for that with timestamps. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, there's over 32,000 topics. You could go to cubaseindex.com. You want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do this to make it a better community experience. And we'll also give special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord server. So check that out. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm presenting from the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area. In Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so we see Tim K. says, grateful to be joining the session once again from Zeist in the Netherlands. Great to have you on. And we see Roland Stuff from UK. And we have Peter from Montreal. Arif B. sending greets from the Netherlands. Music for World Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. And Taylor's question is, in Cubase 13, did they fix the issue where the cloner, when used as an insert and is bypassed, causes the track to play out of time? Let's take a look. I will go ahead and just, I'll duplicate this track so that we could compare to see if it's going to be out of time. Okay, so we'll have these two tracks play. So we get a sense that these two tracks are playing in time. I'm going to put the cloner plugin on. All right. And let me just adjust my monitoring computer volume down here. Bear with me, sorry. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say so it looks like when it's so just to make sure, this is a fixation cloner when used as an insert is bypassed, causes the track to play out of time. So it seems like that's playing in time when it's bypassed. So let me know if so it's on this track and not on the other track. So it seems like that's working, but let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are, Taylor. Always wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, so we see from Carlo, who asks, how to pitch a snare to make a build-up. Okay, so let's say we wanted to kind of a build-up. So let's say I will come over here. Let's just put in some snares. Okay, so let's say I'll start off with quarter notes, and I'll just make this event longer here. Okay, so let's say we'll do quarters. Then we'll do, let's say, quarter note triplet. We'll do eighth, starting here. Okay, and do starting at 16th. We'll do 16th triplet. And let's say for half a measure, and then we'll do 32nd notes. So let's say we have kind of a build up like this. I'll just take the loop off. Sorry about that. All right, so say we now want to change the pitch to go along with this. So if we want to do something like that, all we would have to do is, depending on your instrument, we could just come right over here. We'll select our snare sample. So let's say it's going to be, I'm doing this in Groove Agent. So if we have this, we could just automate the pitch changes. So let's say as we're going along here, I'm going to select pitch and we'll go to coarse. So let's say we want let's say if you automate something better than what I just did. So you could just kind of automate the pitch parameter within the plugin. If you're doing it in the sampler track, you could do the same exact concept of just taking the pitch envelope or drawing in pitch bend just on a particular note as well. So let me know if that makes sense. And then once again, to do that, I would just come over to the pitch. If I was doing it in Groove Agent SE, so go to the instrument, and we say go to edit to pitch, and then we could just set our coarse tuning right there for the pitch. And if we wanted to see that particular, we can see our automation laid out for us right here. So if we wanted that to actually be, let's say, more linear, I could just come over here and just say, okay, let's take our pitch, and we could just kind of draw in the automation. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right, so we see from Music for World Peace Records, feature request, have a setting in the audio alignment tool, like iterative quantize to align them, but optionally not too tight. All right, so let's say if we have like two events, let me see, I think if we have like these two events, so what an iterative quantize is going to be is basically allowing us to set a percentage of the value. So let's come over here to the audio alignment. So there is an alignment precision here that's based on the percentage. So if we wanted to come over here, we could just like an iterative quantization. When we adjust the alignment precision, this could be percentage based right here. So let me know if you've experimented with that, but that's kind of the intention of that. So if you don't want it to be super mechanically tight between the two, that you could adjust the percentage down right there. So let me know if you've tried that and experiment with that, Taylor. But that's what that function is designed to do. All right, so we have Dean Garvey Jazz checking in from California. Glad you can make it today. All right, great to see Peter from Montreal. All right. All right, always wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Alkeed saying hello. Thanks for being on. Samuel Telson says hi. All right, Dallas LaRue asks, I have a song I was working on that seems to have disappeared from Cubase. Is there a way I can find it even if it was accidentally deleted? So one of the things you can do is check in, your Explorer or your recycle bin, or your trash can or your recycle bin, and see if it's actually in the recycle bin. If it was moved to like a different location, what you can do is if you go to the media menu to Media Bay, one of the functions that you could use to search on the Media Bay is going to be for, we have all media types, but we could just choose, we want to search only for projects. And we could say, if you have a rough idea like where your project is, you could say, okay, I want to go to this computer, into documents, and here I could see all of the particular projects that are being used in that particular, that are in this drive right here. So you could search, on your C drive and just look for projects and see if it shows up there. If it was, taken into, this won't look into your recycle bin or trash can, so look there first, and you may have to restore it, move it out of the trash can or recycle bin, and then you could search for it in Media Bay. So that's what I would do, but take advantage of that and let me know how that works for you, Dallas. All right, John Costigan asks, I've made some sort of newbie mistake on a MIDI instrument track. In editing, I wound up with a familiar crosshatch pattern showing stacking of data. How to fix this mistake? Okay, so it could be, let's say if we have this event, and if this is what you mean, let me just colorize this one differently. All right, where we see that the events are kind of overlapping, and we see kind of, if this is like these diagonal lines are, let me see how you describe it, the cross, if this is what you mean by the crosshatch pattern showing stacking data, how to fix this mistake. So if you wanted to go to, if you go to the bottom center, you could choose which part would take priority, which part will play. If it's, you have two parts, and let's say these are, and you want one of the events to kind of disappear. So let's say I have this and I don't want these to overlap. I want to take this and drag it over and have the underlying events erased. If you want that behavior, if you go to your preferences, to editing, we could say delete overlaps. So go to editing preferences, And now when I move this event over top of other events, those underlying events will be deleted. So the overlaps, the events that are overlapped are now deleted. You can still kind of get back to them if we, so let me know if that's what you mean, John. So if we come over here, maybe just add the delete overlaps. Again, go to preferences to editing and see if delete overlaps and maybe toggle that status. But let me know if that's what you mean by that particular pattern, or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, wonderful to see Nick on. Always wonderful to see Jan from Cubase Index. All right, Best Korean Jesus, it says he made it in time. We're looking forward to his hair on the next Zoom meetup, which will be in 2 weeks from today. And Best Korean Jesus saying hello to everyone. All right, Carmine V asks, hi, on occasion my MIDI meter pulses, even though I'm not playing or adjusting any MIDI controllers or devices. Any thoughts on what could be causing that? Some devices have what's called MIDI active sensing, and it's basically just like a little MIDI handshake that says, hey, I'm here, hey, I'm here. So a lot of Yamaha devices do this, so it kind of just sends out like a little, almost like a digital handshake. Look, you're extending its hand looking for the device to, for it to connect to. So while you may not be doing anything, your device may be sending MIDI status, and that's being reflected in the MIDI indicator. So it's generally nothing to be concerned with, but if you have a Yamaha device, Yamaha devices are kind of famous for doing this. Other devices may be doing the same thing. So it's just an active sensing message. All right, so we have the artist known as Love saying hello to everyone, and thank you for everything, Greg. So you're welcome. I'm just glad to be help people. Right, so we see Soren just says, Greg, I hope I didn't mess with you too much. I found a solution to disk cache overload, and I am happy. A little testing was neat on my side. No need to ask you. So you're already, you never hesitate to ask a question. I'm glad you got it figured out. John Costigan says, please hit the like button to ensure continued excellence in the stream. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas, from a rainy morning to an 80 degrees Fahrenheit blue sky afternoon. That's glad the weather's gotten better for you. See, Gary Strauss says, hi, Greg, I figured out a way to utilize the pads in my M Audio Oxygen 61 using MIDI remote. I assigned the pads to move through tracks, open instruments, and change patches. Pretty cool. Yeah, so once you kind of get dialed in with your controller and you can customize it to really speed up your particular workflow, it's great. And that's, I think, the beauty of the MIDI remote is allows you to kind of customize your hardware to your software workflows in a way that's pretty intuitive. So I'm glad you got that figured out. Now you can start coming up with different mapping pages and have, when I'm in the MIDI editor, I want this mapping page. When I'm in an audio editor, etc. When I'm mixing. See, Carlos says, thanks, Greg, it helped. All right, so we see Michael Teams has granted Jazz Dude 1 gallon of Kahula mocha ice cream for his work as on the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord and being an absolutely fabulous moderator. I concur. We appreciate everything Jazz Dude does. All right, Dylan M. DeRosa asks, hi, Greg, any tips using sampler track for playing a sample with tempo sync, halftime, normal, double time using MIDI plus automation? All right, so one of the great things that you'll have with a sample let's say a sampler track, and let me just create a new sampler control here. So if you want to figure out like what, I'm going to just drag a sample in, and we could look at the root key here. So when I play the root key, we can see that this is our original tempo of our drum loop. Now with, and one of the interesting things with mathematics in music is, if we played an octave higher than the original root key, that would be double the frequencies, and in most samplers that means that's going to play back twice as fast. So when we change our root key, I could set, it'll default to I think C3 if it doesn't sense a particular pitch. So if I wanted to play back at the original tempo, we would play it back at the root key. If I wanted to play back twice the tempo, we could play it an octave up. Or if we want to play back half the tempo, we could play, and let me just disable audio warp here. All right, so now when we play back an octave up, plays back at twice the speed. When we play back an octave lower, it's going to play back at half speed. Now, if we want to play at the same tempo, so original, half speed is an octave lower, double the speed, an octave higher. Now, if I wanted to play back and have the same speed, we could just come over and put on audio warp. Now, it's going to play the same speed but different pitches. But if we want it to be half speed and double speed, just take the original root pitch that the sampler track is on, play it up an octave to be double, play down an octave to be half speed. So let me know if that's helpful. Ramin Ali says, hello, Greg. Thank you very much. Last time you helped me a lot. So glad. You just see further questions. Says, I still have a small problem. For the third day, I can't find in Project Logical Editor velocity 0 to 40, 40 to 60. I still can't find it in Project Logical or Logical Editor expression plus 10, minus 10, as well as modulation plus 10, minus 10. All right, so let's say if we want to do to take those values and move them, I guess by 10 values. Let me just, my chat field just jumped. Okay, it says I can't find in the Project Logical Editor velocity 0 to 40, 40 to 60, etc. Okay, so let's say we're going to have, so I will double click, and let's say we have notes, and I want to make these notes fall between 40 and 60. So let's go to our logical editor. So I want to transform notes, and we're going to say type is equal to note. So we want to take notes and we want to adjust their velocity, and we could set to random values between 40 and 60. All right, so let's say I want to now, that I have that, let's say I want to take notes. So I have some notes out of that, above and below that range. So let's say I want to select notes that velocity is inside range 40 to 60. So now I could select all of these notes that have the velocity, and I'll make this full screen here. so we can see a little easier. So now we could only select notes that have velocity between 40 and 60. So, okay, so we see I still can't find a project logical editor or logical expression plus 10, minus 10 as well. So let's say if we have for expression, so let's say we have MIDI CC11 here. So, and we could say I want to transform, and instead of type is equal to note, we want to say type is equal to controller. Our MIDI controller will say, I think we would choose subtype or MIDI controller is equal to, and you could scroll up to expression, and I want to take its main value and I want to subtract 10. So as we do this, I'm going to say apply, and I could take all of the expression values. I could subtract 10. I could also add 10. And I think there is, as well as modulation. So this, if we want to do this for modulation, we would just set this to CC1. And then, you know, once we say, you could save these as presets that could be called up as keyboard shortcuts. So let's say if we have modulation, now we can add 10 to our modulation values. So let me know if those are types of things that you want to do, or if there's something else more specific that you want to accomplish, Raman, Ali. All right, so we have Strange Tune Studio, just waving hi. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, Robbie Bowling asks, I have a small question. I use a UA Apollo interface and the software for it has its own console. Is there a conflict between it and the Cubase version? So I think generally I don't have a UA hardware, but I think generally you would set the settings for the particular console, like, you know, for its DSP effects, probably in the console. And you wouldn't necessarily do that, you know, and I'm not familiar with it since I don't have their hardware, but you would probably set the particular routing and input levels in the console, and that would work in conjunction with Cubase. So I don't, but, you know, obviously the Cubase console is going to have your automation and have access to all of your plugins. So I think it's a way of just being able to access the effects that are kind of native to the hardware. So, always wonderful to see Stefan checking in from Sweden. We have Martin checking in from Germany. Michael Teams has granted Nick 1 gallon of peanut butter crunch ice cream. We have Razel checking in from Denmark. Thanks for being on, being such a loyal attendee. We have Matt Elston. All right. Nick Hack asks, hi Greg, is there a way to assign a MIDI note to the arranger track or marker tracks to be able to trigger different sections of a project with MIDI input? Okay, so we could do this two different ways. One is in a generic remote, or we could do it through the MIDI remote as well. So let's say I have my Korg Nano control, and we could basically assign, I'll set up a new device here. Okay, so I'll scroll over, and I just want to use, I have like a quick Nectar controller. All right. I'm going to set its MIDI input and output ports. All right, so I'm just going to use some of the keys on my I'm just going to assign these as trigger pads. Okay, so as I go to a project, so what I want to do now is to assign these particular keys to functions. So we'll go to our mapping assistant. And as we come over here, let's go to our key commands. We can go to our arranger track and we'll say we want to do, this will play arranger track 1. So let's say as we select, we'll apply the mapping. Let's go to arranger event 2. Select this. Let's go to arranger event 3. Okay, so I will open up a project that has an arranger track on it. So now I've assigned these to trigger the arranger events. I can just hit the keys. And we could choose to have these arranger tracks switch within 1 beat if we wanted to.
All at once you kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. All at once you kissed my face. Falling, falling. Feel good. All at once you kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears off. Falling. All at once you kissed. Feel good.
And then you could just do kind of on the fly. So you could do this through the MIDI remote. Also, if you wanted to accomplish the same thing, if we go to like a generic remote, so say if we go to generic remote settings here, we could assign these to, we go to command and choose arranger. We could now trigger these particular arranger events right here from keys as well. All right, Uno Memento's checking in from Finland, and he's sending 1 non-alcoholic Heineken for everyone. All right. All right, so we see Music for World Peace Records says, for all the time I've used audio alignment tool, I never realized the alignment precision was there. Thank you for that. So we just added it to your system. So telepathically, when you open up your Cubase, you'll see it there. So think of it like a Christmas present in April. Soren just writes, although I'm actually a believer that sometimes I get the spirit of you, Greg, with me when I have problems. Not completely serious, but to a degree, Greg, are in a spiritual harmony. Stressed. Hee hee. All right. Just glad to be able to help people kind of figure out how to solve problems, but glad you're able to. All right, we have a question from Carlo. When I want to automate multiple faders of one track, how to organize it under the track? Okay. So I'm not sure just if you wanted to automate multiple faders with one track. There's 2 different approaches to this. So one is kind of using a group or VCA. So we'll show you. So let's say I have all of my drums very happily working here. All right, so let's say I have all of my So I will come over here. One of the things I could do is add a group channel to all my tracks. Okay, so now I could take this group channel and I could take all of my drums and increase or decrease their volumes. Or if I wanted to now place these into, if we get to a channel strip and say, okay, I want to run this through all of them through the envelope shaper or compressor. So we could process them all together, all the drums, and I can move this one. So that's one method of doing it. Now, if you have a lot of existing automation, what's really helpful is to let me just, I'll show you in another example here. If you have a lot of existing automation, and you want to kind of maintain the relationship between I'll just activate read on all these quickly here. Okay, so let's say all these drums have like existing automation going on them. Okay, so one of the things I could do is select all of the drum tracks and I could assign a VCA, add a VCA fader to them. We'll call this drums. And let me just assign that one more time. Sorry about that. All right, so now I could come over here and I could adjust my VCA fader. I can move this one fader. And even though I'm moving the fader down, we can see that tracks where the automation is going in a contrary motion are still. So if I move it up, we can still see tracks that are going down, but we could kind of attenuate or boost that and still maintain the existing automation of that. Now, one other method that could be even a little simpler if you don't have automation and you quickly just want to say, okay, I need to take these tracks, is just enabling like what we call Q-Link. So if I say, okay, I now want to move one of them and have all of them move proportionally, we could do that. Or if we want them all to the same value, we could click on absolute. And then we can move one fader and then all these can be linked together as well. So Q-Link. And you could also access that by holding down Alt or Option plus the Shift key, temporarily let go. And then you can move a single fader. So, okay, this one needs to be louder. So now I could just come over here. Let's adjust this. And now we could proportionally hold down Alt or Option plus the Shift key. We could move those together. So let me know if that is helpful for you. See from Carmine V, just says thanks. Okay, so we have Harry Dime checking in from Cyprus. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see Faraday Webb says hi, maybe a rookie question bit. So you can ask simple questions or advanced questions. Whatever question you have, please just ask, and everyone learns from everyone else's questions. See, Peter Patah just says MIDI pulsing. It's like ET phoning home. That's a good analogy, Peter. So, see, Peter has been granted 1 gallon of carrot cake ice cream. Sounds like a good choice. Okay, Michael Teams is granted 1 gallon of German chocolate cake ice cream to my family and myself. Thank you. Right, Dylan M. DeRosa says, hi, Greg, very helpful. Right. Parabot2 says hi to me and to everyone else. Always great to see Randy Lee from Texas. All right, Faraday Webb asks, when I make program changes in Cubase to my synths, motif, and montage M, it works fine, but when I load the project the next time, program changes are not sent. How to solve this? Okay, so let me know if you have the program changes where they're actually inserted. So there's 2 main areas that people could instantiate a program change. So if you are doing it from, so let's say if we are doing the program change, let me just add a MIDI track. So you could, just do the program change right from here, or if you're doing the program change, if it's in the event itself. So if we do a program change as a system common message, we could see that if it's in the particular event, or if you actually see it going to be just come over here. So we could, let me just not have it go to, but if we're sending the program change and right from here, if you don't, this is going to play back, you might need to start at the beginning of the event for the program change to be embedded. So let's say if we have our program change here on 12, so let's say we have program change 12, and let's see if I do freeze MIDI modifiers. If now, when we look at this particular event, we look at it in the list editor. So I think if we do a freeze MIDI modifiers, we look at it in the list editor, that we could see our program change 12 that we just embedded. So this is the one I just kind of drew in. So let me know if the program change, you entered it here. But you could also, just by going to MIDI to freeze MIDI modifiers, that particular setting you have here could then be embedded into the actual event. And that way, I don't think it's contingent upon playing back. Also, one other preference to check is if you go to MIDI and And I think if we go to Midi to chase events, that program change is checked here as well. And then it should, go back and look for previous program changes. So, but let me know exactly where you're inserting the program change. Let me know if it's sending the right program change, but maybe not the right bank message as well. So if it's sending it, but it's not going to the particular correct bank, you might have to send the appropriate bank message as well. All right, so we see from Ramin Ali, thank you so much, Greg, with 5 hands up. So you're welcome. That was probably with the logical editor. All right, 808 King says, hi, Greg, Cubase 13, Mac, like direct offline processing, make permanent. Can I make all volume automation permanent also? And do you recommend? So you can. So it's pretty easy to. So let's say I want to come here and I had a volume change. I had automation going on of this particular event. So let's say come here and I want to, so we listen to this drum loop and it's going to get louder and softer. So if we wanted to do like almost a direct offline processing using, but we wanted to apply automation or values that change, I would just select the particular event and do a render in place. Let's go to our render settings. And we want to choose I think we'll choose our complete signal path. And we'll mute our original source. So we'll come over here. And if I don't have that selected, that now we can see that this change has automatically been rendered. The volume change has been rendered into the file itself. So as soon as we do this, we can see that those particular volume changes. So all you have to do again is just do a render in place, and then the automation of volume and other plugins can be kind of frozen and embedded into the file as if it was doing a render, as if it was doing a direct offline processing. All right, Uwe 303 says, I'm thinking about upgrading from 12 to 13 Pro. So yeah, take advantage of the promo. I think it's still going on. And you could get an additional 6 plugins free of charge, other tools. All right, got your asks. When I make my own sampler tracks, where do the presets save? I move things between a laptop and PC, and I want my presets in both. Where to find a preset date to move the files. So when we do this, if we create a sampler track, we could save that as a track preset. So once we come over here, we could save it as a track preset. So this track preset will then reference where the audio file was dropped into. So if you keep the same exact projects, so if you want it to be within the project folder, for if you have a project you're using, and you take the project from your studio desktop computer to a portable laptop, and you load up the project and the audio files are still going on. Let me just turn my phone down. and the audio files are migrated over, it's going to reference the same path that the audio files are. What some people will do is take the sampler track and have a samples folder and then set it up so that as we do the preferences here, so we can say, and we go to preferences to editing to audio, you could say on import options, we could choose copy all files to project folder. You could choose to delete that. And then if you have the same path for both samples, we could just simply, it would reference the same path. So that way you could have all your samples in a different folder. And when you make your track presets here, it's going to reference the original samples from the folder. But, you know, as we make samples, when we go to our pool window, we could now come over here, we can see the sampler track, that the files that we drop in are going to be right there. But the intention is that as we do this, that it's going to be stored within the particular project, and you could open up the files, open up that track preset, and those files in the location will just simply be carried over. So you open up the track preset, but you may have to kind of plan a bit if you're migrating between two different computers. All right, Erwin Voss asks, "Hi Greg, I'm unable to select a quantized value in a key editor. It's grayed out. I did a search on the internet, but nothing that works. I'm on Cubase 13 latest version." All right, so let's take a look why it's grayed out. All right, so let's see if this track is, let's say if I move it here, let me just see if it's disabled, if that makes a difference. That doesn't seem to. So I haven't seen it grayed out. So there's no values there. So one thing that you could check, see if you go to the quantize panel. So we could do this, and you could also do it from the edit menu. Go to the quantize panel, and what's the little trick if I remember? All right, so see if it shows up in your quantize panel, and then so once you open up the quantize panel, select the value, go to the bottom and click on Restore Factory Presets and see if that brings them back. So maybe they all got deleted. So, but again, go to your edit menu to quantize panel. Click in the value, scroll all the way down, and try to click on Restore Factory Presets and see if that will restore them for you. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. I have Cubase 12 Pro. I'm having a hard time recalling my external hardware once they are stored in favorites. I get a message, it's already been created, but does not apply the routing. So mine has always kind of done that. Make sure that there's, maybe if you could let us know if there's any changes to your audio interface, like sometimes switching your, sometimes switching the particular, sample rate of your audio interface. If you have like digital connections, may have, you may go from 4 channels to 8 channels depending upon your sample rate or your configuration. If you have an ADAT port set as an optical in, as opposed to like, you know, a stereo connection as opposed to a 8-channel connection, if those things. But if you could let us know which audio interface you have, if there's any sample rate changes, and also, yeah, and let us know that as well. And if you're able to, once you go to the audio connections, if you are able to actually see the available connections here, once they're, if you try to manually reset it, if you're able to. We see some moderation from Jazz Dude. We have IUL sending greetings from Switzerland. Let me make sure I got MD Abu Bakar's question. Right, you see that little Jazz Dude had done some moderation on that. I don't know if I got the question. I'm just going back and looking through, see if I answered the question, or if maybe it was just asked a bunch of times. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. Harry Dime asks, hi, sending greetings from Cyprus. Just a question. I'm using Cubase 11 Pro, and I noticed that Omnisphere doesn't always load the sounds when I reload a project. Is there a specific reason? So usually when it's stuff like that, you know, if you're noticing that it's only like one particular plugin that's doing, I would say it's maybe systemic to the particular plugin. So I really haven't run into issues where, you know, programs haven't loaded. I don't work with Omnisphere a lot. It could be that perhaps, you know, I know that it could be taking, you know, maybe it's taking a lot of memory that it's not seeing initially. So I don't think it's anything that's Cubase specific. Maybe you have the ability to assign more memory in, or preload memory into some of the Omnisphere sounds. So maybe you could check something like that. But I think it's going to be outside of Cubase, or maybe, you know, Cubase, it you know, the plugin is maybe not loading up because there's maybe a memory restriction on files that are being preloaded, something like that. But I wouldn't say it's a setting in Cubase to really change. It's probably within the plugin. All right, so we have Avri from Tel Aviv just asking how I'm doing. So I'm doing wonderfully well. Thank you for asking. Hope you're doing great. Thanks for being on this afternoon or evening for you. Okay, so we see from Parabot 2. Hi Greg, can you show how to set up mapping page for the Nano Control 2? All right, so let's say we have our, I'll just jump back here. I have my Nano Control 2, so this is just kind of set up. So when we go to the mapping page, we could access it from up here in the right-hand corner. So we could do that. We could select our particular, so let's say I have my Nectar, or I have my Korg Nano Control, and this is our mapping page. So you'll get a number of mapping pages with it. So you'll get like the focus quick controls, you will get the mixer, selected tracks, EQ of selected tracks, And then these are different mapping pages that I've made over time for different purposes. So if I wanted to start afresh, start brand new, fresh with multiple parameters, what I would do is click on the little plus sign, and then we will just come over here. We'll call this Parabot 2. And now we could see every button is free of all assigned controls and functions, and we could just double click and assign any particular function to that. So, and then you go, okay, I now want this to work as focus quick controls. You could just click right there. You could actually have a button go to specific mapping pages as well if you wanted to. So, all right, further questions. How do I get my MIDI drum parts onto separate tracks, kick, hi-hat, etc., all separate and in a folder? Okay. All right, so I'm going to come here. We have a drum part where we have kick, snare, hi-hat, etc. And I want these all into separate tracks. So this may be a two-step process, but if we go to our MIDI menu to dissolve part, and we say separate pitches. All right, so now we could see all these. So my kick, snare, hi-hat, they're all on different folders. And now what I want to do is we could just right click and say move selected tracks to new folder, and then we have our drum folder laid out for us. So once again, go to your MIDI menu to dissolve part, separate pitches, and then those will all be selected. Once it's selected, come over and you just right click and move selected tracks to new folder. So Pertico Menon has received 1 gallon of Texas pecan ice cream from Michael Teams. And Pertico Menon has given Michael Teams double espresso coffee with creamy syrup. Okay. Reading through comments here. All right, so we see from Yazian, it says, Dear Greg, something went wrong. Please contact your local support team and have the error code DRE.411 ready. I see for all my licenses, I have by Cubase. What's wrong? So check to make sure, like when you're in your, when you go to your Steinberg activation manager. So when you come here to your Steinberg activation manager, make sure that you're actually signed in. So, when you go to your setup here, make sure that you're actually logged in with your credentials, and just make sure that you're right there, that you're logged into your credentials. So, but check out. But if you could give me some more information, I could, or if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to. You can email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I could do a search for the error message. All right, Nikki Zarin asks, hi from Romania, best regards. How did you set the control room? It looks useful. So the control room, we could think of it as being a separate monitoring path. So let's come over here to our audio connections. So what I generally do is I have my output, a stereo output, and I have this a stereo output or multi-channel output if I'm doing 5.1 or immersive projects. And I will have this defined as a kind of a routing destination, but the monitoring path goes directly, well, actually, where I tell it to go to my particular audio interface, we could just come over and right click and add a monitor. And this is where I set it up. So if I have an audio interface that has multiple outputs, I could add, and I have 2 or 3 sets of speakers, I could now come over here, we could add different monitors, stereo 5.1, 7.1.4, and now we're able to switch between our different monitors. But I think one of the main things about the control room is the fact that it decouples the monitoring volume from the gain structure of your mix. So there's lots of great stuff you do. So, but you know, the most important thing is, let's say if I'm playing back a project here, and I'll just revert this. All right, so you can see that when I adjust, what a lot of people do is they take their main level here because they're going into powered speakers, and generally the knob, the volume control in powered speakers is in the back, so they may use this as their monitoring level. But we can see that as we adjust the monitoring level here, our signal gets attenuated. So if you exported a signal and you're using this as your monitor control, we're going to lose a lot of gain from that. But now I could use the control room and I could adjust the gain of the monitoring path without affecting the gain structure of the mix. And once I'm here, I could also say, okay, let's go ahead and we could do different elements for, you know, I want to do a down mix. So what would this project sound like? I want to check it for mono compatibility in stereo, 5.1 or 7.1.4. And I could have plugins just on the monitoring path. So if I want to do something like have room correction, where the room correction is not applied to the particular track for our export, but we hear it on our monitoring path to correct deficiencies in our mixing environment, that we could now have this in the control room. So that those corrections for deficiencies in our monitoring environment aren't applied to the mix. So lots of great things you could do in a control room. All right, so we have a question from Daniel. Where can I buy Cubase and its patch, please? So, you know, generally, I'm not sure what country you live in, but you generally could buy it from a local music retailer or directly from the Steinberg website. In the US, you know, there's different stores, you know, Guitar Center, Sweetwater, different stores like that are popular, Washington Music. In Europe, there's Thomann, which is very popular, or you could get it directly from the Steinberg website, the Steinberg online shop. So anywhere that you could buy music products, you should be able to get a copy of Cubase. All right, Harry Dime asks, the Spectralayers one that comes with Cubase 11 Pro used to show within Cubase, but it's not showing anymore. I can open it only as standalone. Is there a way to reinstate it? So make sure that you can install the latest version, but make sure that you're running it as, you'll see, as an extension here. So you should be able to open up Spectralayers on a particular track. Or if you select the event here, you could see the Spectralayers extension. So, but if you don't see it showing up as an extension, I would maybe reinstall. And there's been some changes with, how ARA extensions have been implemented from like 11 to 12 and 12 to 13 as well. We see from Roland Stuff says, "Hi Greg, I just want to say that using free warp on events lined up in the project window is a real game changer when it comes to synchronizing vocals and background vocals. Hope everyone knows about it. Thanks." All right. Yeah, so if you're not familiar, and something else that you could do with this if you don't know it as well, with background vocals especially, so if we wanted to kind of manually tweak things, the functionality of what we see is really pretty astonishing with the, so I'll just make this so we could see all these. But let's say if we have vocals that are a little bit, like we have background vocals that are out of time. And these aren't quite as tight. There's also the audio alignment. So if we just come over here, we could go to our alignment panel and I could choose one source as the reference. And then I could choose multiple other sources as targets and align audio. And then you could just do aligning like that as well. So now we listen to it. And you could always... So you can make it significantly tighter just doing kind of auto align. But if you wanted to manually do it, the free warping on a project window is really great as well. And that could be kind of, the free warping could be tied to the grid. All right, we have a question. People believe that Cubase 13 have AI tools. Also, is it real news? If it is, so what kind of tools are based on AI? So it could really depend on what your definition of AI is. I would say that if, taking a guitar performance, for instance, if I wanted to come here and let's see if I have a... So let's say I want to take this part right here, this guitar. And let's go to the project and say the chord track. That we can now come over and just create the chord track based on the audio performance. So you could call that AI. We could also generate harmony voices. That's been done in Cubase for a long time from a single part, that we could generate harmony voices that are following the chord track, that we could give chord track suggestions. That could be artificial intelligence. The fact that we could quantize your vocal to particular, keys, the pitch of vocals, that could be considered AI. Quantizing functionality could be considered AI. Inside of Nuendo 13, there are AI-based algorithms for doing tonal match or also doing like voice separation. So there's, it really depends on what your definition of AI is. So. All right, so you see from Faraday Web says program changes I insert on the left side, not in the event. It works fine that way, but the problem is, but the problem is when I load, just seeing some emails coming in from, think about the license. All right, let me. Okay, so program changes are set in the left side, not in the event it works that way. The problem is when I load a project, the next time the program changes will not work. I have to send it manually. So make sure that, when you do that, that you're actually going to the very beginning part of the project. But again, if you go to freeze MIDI modifiers, see if when you do that, if the freeze MIDI modifiers, that will take the program change message from directly from the inspector and embed it into the part. See if that will resolve it for you. All right, great to see Spa Dogs from Canada. All right, so Nikki Zarin asks, can you provide a downloadable project that contains that control room settings? So the control room is kind of project independent. So the project itself doesn't contain the control room settings. The control rooms are kind of, think of it like how your speakers are kind of independent of your project. So if I get sent a project, it wouldn't contain the control room settings. It has to be kind of configured on your own end, and then the audio as you play it out would go through the control room if you have it activated or not. So it's not part of the project, it's kind of part of how your Cubase kind of current configurations are set up. All right, Michael Teams says, tracking Vox last night, suddenly had delay and the live mic, turned all plugins off, still there. What would Greg do? Went to constrain delay compensation and voila, delay is gone. Thank you. I like how everyone gets to vicariously have me solve problems from their loyal attendance and viewership of Club Cubase live streams. So yeah, so plugins on other tracks or other areas of the program, monitoring paths, stuff like that can also cause the delay as well. All right, so I see Erwin Voss says factory store is not working. So if you want to send me a project, you could see if I could see if it is working. I think this is with the quantized presets. But if you want to send me a project, I'd be happy to take a look at it. If you want to share it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it and see if we get it sorted out, and I could do some more research on it. Okay, so we see, I just see question. After migration, I was unable to link my pool of sampler instrument presets. So let me know if you did how you did the migration, if you migrated projects over. So generally, or if you let me know if you migrated one, like on Mac OS, from one computer to another computer. That information could be helpful. And we see Erwin Voss just says, due to what I found in Steinberg forms, it has something to do with the secondary time display. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say right, so I'm just going to swap my time display here. So let's say we go to seconds. So make sure, make sure that your bars, that your main grid is set to bars and beats. So see if you switch that to bars and beats there. So right now we could see our grid, and we could, generally you would have the choice of snapping different elements, but try switching that. So if we have our primary and secondary display here, so I'm going to take my time display, and we see these 3 dots. I'm going to extend that over to the right, and I'm going to make this into seconds. So let's say I go to bars and beats here. Then if I hit the period key, so if it's saying grid, make sure that your main grid format here is in bars and beats. And if you have your secondary and primary display set, you could just hit the period key and see if your options show up right there. Okay, so we see Ferrod just says he has a quantum 48 by 48. I think this is for the external, with the favorites on the external effects. So, make sure, let me know also if you did if there was any sample rate changes between those. I could do some, I'll see if I'll do it on my current audio interface is just like a 2 in 4 out, but I have more ins and outs. I have 24 in and out on my studio computer, and I'll test it if you want to email me just as a reminder that I could look into it for next live stream. But I've always had kind of the favorites just restore their connections, but if the connections aren't in the same state based on sample rate or something like that, that could cause it to be off. And we see from Ferrod says it stores the hardware but not the routing. So okay, so Aaron Voss just says, okay, bars and beats on time display, but tried that, but nothing is changing. So, make sure also, because there's 2 different things, because there's 2 things that could look like quantize presets. So one, let me know if when you actually, if you select notes and hit quantize, if it actually moves, but there's also like a nudge. So if you have, like currently I have the nudge turned on here. So it could be, like your nudge, and this nudge we could have set to seconds here. So this may look like a quantized preset, but, but these could be very similar looking, especially if you're kind of in bars and beats. So make sure that, just out of curiosity, in the MIDI editor, if you take the nudge off, see if, because we could have like our nudging set to 128th and our quantize set to 1/8. So, but if you actually select the notes and hit Q, let's say we set it to whole note, will the notes actually, so let's say if these are off here, will the notes actually, apply and move based upon your hitting quantize. So we can see if the quantize is working, but make sure that you're not looking at the nudge value as opposed to the quantize value. And if you want to send me a screenshot, I'd be happy to take a look at it. All right, so we see Zanomzi, gospel artist. Where do you get the metronome on Cubase 13 Pro? So it's just going to be, you could activate it right here, activate the metronome, or you could hit the C button. So as you play, at this point, we could hit C to turn it on and off. And other metronome settings, if you want to change the click, you could go to the metronome setup, and this would allow you to have different settings for click sounds, click patterns, etc. If you wanted to have an audio click or MIDI click, where the MIDI click is going, different elements like that. All right, so you see Nikki's there and just says I'm using a Army UCX2 and I'm trying to set the control room as showed over here, but don't know how to route all those things that Greg has. A project would be useful. So again, it's not carried over in a project. It's just kind of, you have to configure it for your particular setup and your inputs and outputs. Sorry about that. All right. Adam Clarks asks, hi Greg, could you please show me how to connect a reverb pedal to an audio track as a send effect? Thank you very much. All right, so we need to take the inputs and outputs of your audio interface. So we need to come over to your audio connections. We need to add, if we come over here to external effects, so let's say we want to add an external effect here. We'll just say, okay, it's our pedal reverb. All right, and we'll say it's a stereo in, stereo out. Your pedal reverb may not do that, but all right, so what we need to do is to tell where in the audio interface it's connected to. So we need to define, and your audio interface would probably need to have multiple inputs and outputs that aren't being utilized for the for monitoring and playing back. But we need to, so once we have, it's going out of, it's being sent out of these outputs and it's returning into these inputs of my audio interface, we would take the guitar part and say, okay, we're going to now take that guitar part and we're going to create an effects send. So we'll go to our sends and we will say, let's add effects channel to send to or send one. We're going to choose our external plugin. We're going to say our pedal reverb. Once that pops up, this could impose a latency going in and out of the system. You want to measure the delay. That will compensate for the latency. And now when you play, you could just say, okay, we want to send more of the signal out. And this is going to go out through our outputs of our interface into the pedal, back into Cubase, and now we can control the send level. So again, you need to configure it under Studio menu to audio connections to external effects, set the correct routing for your inputs and outputs, add it like another plugin, click on the measure delay button, and then you should be all set. Okay, so we have Odora saying hi. Okay, Music for World Peace Records asks, in the key editor, sometimes when I mute an event, it grays out, other times it just disappears. What could affect the difference? All right, let's take a look. Let me just jump All right, so I'll mute some events here. Okay, so they usually kind of turn gray or white. So let's say if I have events that are maybe outside the boundary. Let's see if I come here. So even if it's outside the boundary, it's still, so I've always had it kind of turn white when it's muted. So, didn't like that. All right. So I haven't had it disappear on me, but I wonder if it's something along the lines of maybe an overlapping event. So let me see if we do an overlapping event. Let's just try that real quick. Hang on. Okay, so now we're here and we have overlapping events. So you can see that even when I go to the underlying event. So let me know, Taylor, if there's underlapping events or if maybe or overlapping events that could be causing it, but it seems like it's always kind of turns white, indicating that the MIDI events are muted. Let me just make sure it's the event as opposed, or the notes as opposed to the event. Okay, so when a muted event, it grays, and other times it just disappears. Okay, so it's the event, sorry. All right, so generally, now there could be a preference. Let me just, we just look for, I think it's treat muted audio events like deleted. All right, so let me, if I come over here, let's just, even with that preference turned on. So I let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are. But it seems like they all kind of turn white and don't disappear on me. I see Michael Teams is saying Hot Mess is working on the next project. Don't worry, we're all crazy. It's not a competition. So looking forward to playing some more bass. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button. All right. All right, Tim K asks, Control Room looks cool, only available in Pro. So yeah, it is a Cubase Pro feature, Cubase Pro and Nuendo. right, Dependicon Audio Manufacturers asks, hi Greg, is there a way to set the specific zoom setting, specific default zoom setting for the Very Audio editor? Thanks. So I think that it tries to like figure out like, you know, for the context of the event. So let's say if I'm here and we do an analysis, so I don't think that there's a default level, because you could be in a, you know, for your vertical and horizontal zoom. So let's see if I come here, let's just edit the Very Audio. So let's say I activate this. So, you know, depending upon the melodic contour of the events, I think it tries to show you, like, by default, the main context of where it is, but I don't think that there's a default view, like a zoom state for the particular, for the sample editor, which would include the Very Audio. But if you're here, as we do that, we'll notice that it will try to basically figure out where you could see most of the contents, but not a default zoom, and because that could be different for every project depending on the melody. All right, so we have from question, is it possible to make Cubase's Supervision display fixed on the right hand side or the bottom? I think it'd be very convenient. It's such a great function. It was displayed in an easy to see place. So we have lots of people I've seen that will just have Supervision, you know, directly on, you know, entirely on a dedicated screen. So you could place it kind of anywhere you want. So, you know, whether you want it, and obviously Supervision is very adept at kind of scaling to different screens. So if you wanted this to be below your project window, you could do that. And you could also save these as workspaces to recall. So a lot of this could be set, you know, just by utilizing workspaces. So if we wanted to have my Cubase project window, you know, be smaller, we can set that there, and then have Supervision below, and then, you know, we could have this set. But I think kind of the, you know, so as we're playing, we could have this set up if you wanted to. So again, and those could be just recalled via, you know, workspaces as well. So there's a lot of flexibility there, but, you know, I've seen lots of people migrate to doing a full screen of Supervision. All right, we have the artist known as Love, just says, please hit the like button. All right, and we see Taylor just describing his mute situation. Says this happening on a single click. When it happens, it continuously in the same track. When it mutes continuously as well for the track I'm working on. So I wonder if it's, you know, if you get the same exact results with, like, if you have a spare mouse or computer keyboard, like, but, you know, it almost seems like maybe like there's a modifier key that's stuck on. So let's say, you know, but I can't, I'm unable to reproduce that. So, but, you know, if you hold down, let's say if you click, you know, you can, You know, it almost seems like maybe the keyboard is spitting out or the mouse is spitting out different commands, but I can't get it to recreate what you're doing. But I was curious if you have a spare mouse and see if that makes a difference, or a spare computer keyboard if you get the same results, Taylor. All right, so we see, will Cubase 13 be compatible with Windows dark mode soon? So I haven't tried. So I have Windows 10. I haven't upgraded to Windows 11 yet, but I haven't tried it with dark mode. I don't see why, I haven't heard of it not working, but there could be different themes and stuff that doesn't work, but I could do some more research and maybe have an answer by Friday. Okay, so we see Erwin Voss says, Greg, I found a solution by changing the project time display in the project setting from bars and beats to seconds, and then back again to bars and beats. Turns back on to quantize. It says, thanks a lot, but the problem is fixed. All right, glad we got it sorted out for you. We see Jazz Dudes running it in dark mode with no problems. All right, so we see from Nick Hack, hi Greg, is there any way to host multiple audio samples and trigger them with a single MIDI controller whilst making sure they warp to any tempo changes? So you could do this in Groove Agent. So we'll just do new project here. All right, so we'll just add a Groove Agent SE. We'll drop some drum loops in. Okay, so now we have all right, so I'm going to put these on. So we have this sample. So that's one tempo. This is faster, and so different tempo. So what we want to do is let's go to our sample, and we're going to choose audio warp. All right, and I'll just say let's put this on audio warp. Select this, let's put it into audio warp. All right, so now when we play back, we say our tempo will set to 140. So just put each one onto audio warp, and then you could have it just sync to the project tempo, and then you could just play them from your controller. All right, Carmen V asks, I don't know if this place asked about VST Live, but if so, I'm wondering if you know if it offers the same functionality as MainStage for a live keyboard rig or includes any VST instruments. So yeah, you could do not only like what you would, I'm not that familiar with MainStage, but you could definitely set up your different controls for different instruments. It comes with like Retrolog, Pad Shop, Hallian Sonic 7, so that you have access to all those different sounds. You could host other VST instruments or hardware instruments, but not only will it allow you to say, okay, diverse and coarse, we're going to do this, we're going to do splits and layers, but it's also going to control lighting, playback of audio. It's going to have other additional functions, like, you know, where you could control, you know, see the chords, you could have the lyrics come up. So I think, I don't know what all MainStage does. I don't have a license of it, not that familiar, but I think it's that plus the ability of playing backing tracks with being able to record, being able to, you know, basically run an entire live production as well. All right, Dean Garvey Jazz says it'd be nice to have a visual metronome with no audio also. So I think if you want to see like the bars and beats, I think that there are some freeware VST plugins, but something that you could do which may give you like, you know, a classic, you know, sit on top of your piano metronome. But if you go to your time display here and change the value to bars and beats, here you could see, and if you want to see only the beat count, you could set that up as well. So as you're playing in your project, you could just see your metronome, and that's silent as you work on it. So again, go to your studio menu, to more options, to time display. And then you could choose bars and beats, and you can say show the beat counter only. So let me know if that's helpful, Dean Garvey Jazz. Okay, so we see from Audition, I migrated to the same PC due to hardware problem. I had almost 100 plus sampler instrument presets I created using my synthesizer. I copied them to the same path. I found them, but my project files had those pool audio. Can I get them using any short way? I want them back. So if you know, do you have the original, you know, files where the, you know, the original audio files, are those preserved, or you just have, because the, you know, the sampler instrument presets have the, so, you know, you might have to open up the project if that's where the projects, you know, the audio files are in the projects. So, you know, it's not just copying over the sampler track presets, you know, but copying over the audio files as well. So, but if you have, it says those pool audio file, can I get them using some short way? So you could try to import the tracks, you know, if you go to your file menu and just say import, not track archive, but import, and you could do this all into, so let's say we want to go to file, to import tracks from project. So let's say I want to come over here. I want to go to my project sampler track. All right, so I'm going to come over here. Let's get to this project. And now I'll select all. And now when I go into and we could do that for multiple projects, you could just keep importing them. And when we go to our pool window, when we go to our audio, we can see that all the audio tracks from the samplers have now been imported. So if you just import tracks from project and take where all of your sampler files are, you could put them into a new consolidated project if you wanted to. Wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Wilmington, North Carolina. Glad you can make it today. All right, Piano Poet asks, hi Greg, I have a 4K display with 34 inches. At 100%, Cubase is too small. At 125%, this display is also incorrect. Example, you have to scroll when the lower zone is being edited. What is the best setting? So, it could really depend, like the resolution that I like running Cubase at myself, and I have, my own vision issues. Kind of independent of all this, but I'm running it at a 1920 by 1080 resolution, which is kind of like a 1080p. I find this to be a very comfortable resolution to work with, so don't think of it as scaling. So if you want it to be easy to read, so I'm currently what you're seeing is my transmission. I have a 27-inch screen. And I find this, I'm maybe 2 feet away from it. I find it's kind of a very comfortable working environment. So maybe instead of the scaling, try to set the resolution, to try something like 1920 by 1080 or 1080p. If this looks okay on your screen, like this resolution of size, and a resolution that's too small for you to read may be perfect for someone else to read. So it's hard to give a definitive answer, but maybe try starting with a known resolution as opposed to 4K, which everything will be very small. And sometimes if you want to have a lower resolution at 4K, you could have 4 pixels per dot, so that it can make it look sharper. So, but try maybe starting with a known resolution and go from there as opposed to 100%, 125% scaling. All right, we have a question. Is the title bar going to be merged with the menu bar again for Cubase 13 on Windows? Because right now the title bar is a waste of screen space. So I think that there's, when we're working with different windows for like a multi-Windows compliant, that's kind of how it's set up. So, but I'll pass on the feedback, but I think it's kind of the, how it's to be multi-Windows compliant, how it is set up. All right, so we have Benoit Campadel from sending greetings from France, and Piano Poet is sending his greets from Germany. I see Benoit just shares he's a 4-screen also with 150% set up in Windows. He's not activating high DPI in Cubase to avoid issues with plugin windows. Works fine, but some plugins don't scale very well. All right, Adam Clarks asks, hey Greg, I have another question please. How do you route the sound of the metronome to in headphones only, not in the speakers? Thanks again. Okay, so let's come over here, and I have the metronome going on. So when we go to our control room, we want to come over here to the main, So we may just come right over here and we can say, so right now it's not going out of the speakers, but if we have the headphones set up, we can, if we have the headphones in the studio, or if we're using the control room for sending cue mixes, this way the control room could be muted in the speakers, but let's say for the drummer, they want to hear the metronome, but this singer, the bass player wants to hear, but maybe the singer doesn't want to hear the metronome. So you could, for each individual cue mix, you could have different, you could have the metronome being routed to different cue mixes, whereas independent of the click track that's being heard in the speakers. So give that a try. All right, so we see Michael Pierce, one quick question with Cubase 13 upgrade. A load of upgrades for Steinberg activation versus the dongle are in my account. Mistakenly upgraded one, but if I don't use them, do they stay there indefinitely? So I think they will, I think when it is, I think that they do stay there indefinitely. I'm inclined to say so. I've had some in my system that have been there for a long time. When they disappear is like when they place the vouchers in your My Steinberg account for like the current promotion, where you get the partner products, that those partner products will disappear after after the promotion ends. But I think your licenses will remain intact. All right, great to see Jazzy Lamel on, as well as Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. Thanks for being online today. John Koskin says the dude abides. All right, so music for Real Peace Records asks, I do have a spare keyboard connected regarding the key editor issue. This happens only in the piano roll. Yeah, so if you want to send me, I just can't, seem to be, so I'm not sure if it's a spare MIDI keyboard or a spare computer, like QWERTY keyboard, but I mean, if you want to send me like a picture of like a before and after, if you run into it, Taylor, a screenshot, if you want to email it to me, I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it, but I can't really seem to duplicate kind of the same issue that you had. So I'm not sure if it's in the key editor or if when you said it was the event. So, but if you have a screenshot, I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it for you. All right, Jazzy Lamel asks, greetings, Greg. I would like to know if there's a shortcut for Quick Link. All right, so all you have to do is, let's say we take this into our mix console here, is hold down Alt-Option plus Shift. And that will, when those keys are held down, our selected tracks will be in Q-Link. I release the keys, they turn off, But again, Alt or Option plus Shift, that will temporarily turn on and off Q-Link. So do that. All right, so Tim K is also running Windows 11 Pro with Artist 13. Says the DAW works just fine for me in dark mode, so that's good. And 99 says it's Windows 11 dark mode not work at Cubase 13. This is confirmed in a Cubase thread, so it seems like other people are running it without problems. All right. David Roloff asks, how can I automate the sample length in Groove Agent? For example, the reason is to bring more liveliness to the drumming. Okay. Okay, so let me just pop over here. We'll open up the instrument. So I'll set this. Let me go to my MIDI remote. Let's go to my Korg, and I'm just going to tell it to do my focus quick controls. Okay, so let's say okay, so I want come over here to sample, and let's all right, so we could adjust this, like the sample length. So let's say all right. So usually I wouldn't think of like the sample length as being for more liveliness, but let's see if we could. Okay, so let's just come here. Let's see if we set this for. Because usually liveliness would be more like, you know, variations on, I would think more variations on velocity, but not length of the sample. So, but I think if you wanted to do that, you could probably, if you come here to the amplifier section, and maybe let's. But let's see if I wanted to come over. And a lot of times in sampling, you know, like if you're doing more of an acoustic kit, that you could do, like let's say if I'm doing this more, let me just. that this, like the acoustic kits would have kind of like the round robins kind of built in to the sample sets, so that as you are kind of working, with the instrument sounds, that you could have, that it's going to have those natural variations for liveliness. But I don't think that the sample length, because especially drums are so much based on the attack, that you wanted to have those subtle variations that's going to be on the attack and not the length. But let me know if that doesn't make sense to you. All right, MechStrat asks, can you play all lanes in an audio track simultaneously, like in Reaper, i.e. overlapping events on a single audio track playing simultaneously instead of fading into the other? All right, so we see, lanes are going to play back one particular sound, and it's really, you have to ask if you actually, since there's unlimited audio tracks, if you needed to have more than different voices of polyphony. And I think, well, it could be a novel feature that, if people accidentally had all of their tracks with overlapping recordings playing simultaneously, that could be a hard issue to find out which track, if you have like 200 tracks of audio going, so that, if you had a mistake on one, that would make it so much harder. And since, there's unlimited tracks of audio, that there's really no need to take a single track into a multi-track environment. So it's just going to play back one voice. All right, Gareth. Wonderful to see Gareth on. He says he thinks he needs a moment's silence for the death of the dongle. He says the dongle dangles no more. So the dongle is still working. It's just in 2025, some point in 2025, you won't be able to activate new licenses on the dongle. So your dongle will still function. So it'll still work. Your licenses won't go away. It will continue to work. You just won't be able to activate new licenses on a dongle, which is good, since there will be, in January 2022, there hasn't been any programs released that have used the e-licenser system. So it's be like a 3-year. But your existing dongle will still function and work. So it hasn't ceased to be. All right, Terrence Shaw says, hi Greg, I would love a vocoder demo. I'm a bit confused with the routing. All right, I don't think I have a great vocoder demo worked out, but I probably should. All right, so let's take... All right, so let's see if we could just make something horrifically bad with this. All right, so let's take these vocals here. All right, and so now when we play this, we can... All right, so now we have our MIDI set to fixed. So I just put this on the vocal track, and we will come over here. We'll just solo that, so it's going to play back. So now what I could do is I'm going to add a MIDI track. And we're going to send this to our plugin. And we're going to say, all right, we're going to do the sidechain into the vocoder. All right, so now when we play these two tracks together, and we're going to set this to external Midi. Set it to external Midi. And we just route this. Make sure that this is going out. To the vocoder. All right, and let me just check. I may have to. So now we can just take our Midi and then as we would kind of play back, we could just process the MIDI. So you want to set up one MIDI track to send the MIDI track to the MIDI information into the audio track. And then you could have the vocoder kind of work. Okay, so we have a development of Void just popping in. Thanks for joining us. All right, just reading through comments. Okay. All right, so you see from the Gicha Tube, could you say Sith about plugins, please? So maybe if you could retype your question, I could, or rephrase it. I'm not sure what Sith is, STH. Okay, so we see Taylor from Music for Real Peace Records will make a video of the piano roll issues. What happens again and send it to me. Yeah, please do. I'd be happy to take a look at it. Gareth has lots of dead dongle comments. Okay, so we see Louis Che ask, hello Greg, is it possible to connect two different interfaces via Thunderbolt, both one for input, the other for outputs, M1, Cubase 13 Pro? So you could connect two interfaces. Realize that you probably want, if you're doing it on Mac, you could use aggregate devices. It's not an ideal solution. It will compound latency of the systems. You also want to make sure that those devices are externally clocked to each other. Otherwise, when you're recording and playing back, those devices could be out of time, which is a bad thing for digital audio workstations. But it's ideally, you'd want one audio interface that has enough inputs and outputs for your needs, but you can do it on an M1 using aggregate devices even, but it's not an ideal solution. So it could be that, your tracks are playing in and out of time with each other and constantly changing because the two clocks aren't actually in sync. All right, wonderful to see JVI. Glad you can make it tonight. Okay, we have another question. How can I write sine wave automation with longer cycles? Longer than 1/4 of grid or one whole note. Okay, so let's say I want to come here. Let's open up our automation. We'll go to volume. I'm going to switch to, let's say, my sine wave. All right. So I'm going to start here. Let's say at measure 8. All right, so I'm just going to hold down the shift key. So right now we're at 2 bars, 2 measures. So I hold down the shift key to change the frequency. And now we could just adjust like so. So as we do this, just hold down the shift key and you could write in different intervals of your sine wave. So you're not limited to one measure. All right, Drano Corleone asks, hi Greg, when zooming in using the timeline by holding the mouse down and pulling down from the top bars and beats, the drawing of audio disappears. Any ideas? All right, so we'll just show this. It could look something so I think it's a preference. Zoom. So if you go to editing, and in 13 it's under editing zoom, we'll see quick zoom. So it's probably now, like as we're playing, if we draw in, it turns blank until I let go of the mouse. So it's all blank. As I let go, then the waveforms will redraw. So again, go to preferences, zoom, and you want to just disable quick zoom. So now that quick zoom is disabled, you can see the waveforms the whole time as we're zooming in and out. So again, preferences, zoom, quick zoom, make sure that's unchecked. Okay, so we see from JVI, quick question. I assume the Absolute Collection can also be installed on 3 machines like Cubase? So yes. So same paradigm, same concept. So the Steinberg licensing, you could run it on a home studio machine, a laptop, as well as your pro studio machine. So 3 separate computers. See, Mexstrat says, what I meant was the equivalent of Play All Takes in Reaper. It's a phenomenal tool to come up with parts that normally wouldn't occur to most, requesting the feature to be added in updates. So I think, that sometimes when you have features like that, they could be problematic, and as someone who's gotten a lot of, who gets lots of questions in live streams and other elements and, phone calls and emails, that that could open up kind of a Pandora's box. I'll pass it along, but I think that you could do the same thing with a multi-track project currently. So I'm not sure why what the advantage of doing it in one single track versus a multi-track environment would be. So if you could share that, and you could put it into a folder track and edit your stuff and treat it the same way. And do you need each one of the lanes to have separate processing with separate editing, separate fades, etc.? Drano Corleone says, boom, thanks. All right. All right, Dennis LaCroix asks, Greg, is there a way from within Cubase to make the text and icons look bigger? So, it's really up to your screen resolution, so it's not within Cubase. If you are running a Windows machine and you're doing high DPI, so it's slightly different on Mac OS, but if you go to the preferences and go to general, once you're in the general preference, that you could come over and you'll see you could say use high DPI, and then there's application scaling, and you could set the application scaling amount, and that can make the the text and different icons appear larger. So it's not on the Mac version, but you could just under general use high DPI, and then there's application scaling as well. So you could try that, see if that makes a difference. All right, so I know we had a couple of questions that were just emailed in. Let's see if I could get to those quickly. Let me see if I can find those. Okay, got that one already. Okay, so I think this was from Yazian. Says license the same type you're trying to download is stored in a selected e-licenser already. There may not be more than one such license present on any given e-licenser. Please restart the process. All right, so let me look at screenshots that he's shared. All right. Okay, so this is a question about the e-licenser I'm looking at. Okay, so I just see this for, let me see if I can find any more of the screenshots that were shared. Just so you see the screen, but the license activation. So it looks like it's already, like maybe you're trying to activate a license that's already activated. So it looks like a trial version. Okay, there's a bunch of... Okay, so I don't think you're going to be able to activate all right, so these look like kind of like, you know, you're not going to get a Cubase Elements 11 trial version or Nuendo 11 trial version, or, you know, so it looks like you're trying to activate older versions of the program, so they're going to activate the current versions, and I don't think that they're going to activate older versions of the program. So I think that might be what you're running into. So, but it looks like, you know, you're trying to install Nuendo 11 trial license, which is, you know, 3 years old. So I think that you're not going to be able to activate older products. So I think that's kind of what you're running into. All right. All right, so we see, hi Greg, is it possible to get a mono down mix in the phone section of the control room? So I think that once you have that, this will just follow the, let's just set it up. So we'll see, but I think that the, we'll come over, I'll switch over the audio, we'll get to my audio connections and go to my control room. We have our phones set up. So I'm going to set my outputs here of the phones to the main bus. So this is what we can hear. So now as we play, so now when I go to my, looks like it's, all right, so it looks like the mono's not working for the down mix there. But let's see if we go to our inserts. If we come over here, let's do like a mix down. Try mix convert, and let's see if we could do it here. Something coming out of the left channel, it's not summing. Let's see if there's a... You just kind of set this up and set the width. You could do the imager plugin as a headphone on the headphone bus. And check for mono compatibility there. So it seems like we should, if we do the kind of the down mix, I would think that it might work, but Doesn't seem like it is in the same way as the downmix preset, so you might have to do it through an external plugin like the Imager and set it to one band. All right, let me adjust my control room back. But let me also just check one other preference, just out of curiosity. If we go to our control room and we say use the phones channel as the preview channel. All right, just make sure that preference stuck. Okay. No, same on the headphones. Yeah, I think it's going to have to be done through a plugin. I'll bring that to the attention of people. Seems like that should kind of work the same method. Be my inclinations. All right. All right, Terrence Shaw asks, is there a vocal chain preset which will give a thin voice a little more girth? So check out, like, I think it's Warm. Let's go ahead and just try it. All right, so I'll just kind of take.
That was a long, long time ago.
All right, so I'll just come over here and get rid of my inserts and sends. I'll bypass. And I'll bypass the processing here.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart through.
I know a lot of my producer
my
friends have
while you called me to.
like the Warm tube vocal.
Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So while I was singing, I'll bypass it.
I remember the day that we wed. Seems like a long, long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that Garth Brooks show.
So try that preset.
Told your daddy
And you may want to just kind of tweak that particular preset as you go on. So. Great. So Fisher Record asks, hey Greg, is there a shortcut for preferences? So if you wanted to open up the preferences, you could assign a keyboard shortcut. So if you wanted to just come over here to the key commands. So let's say you just want to open up preferences. You can do it from the edit menu. And I think this is one that I probably added to open up preferences. And then once you go into the preferences. Each of the preferences can have their own keyboard shortcut as well. But if you just wanted to open preferences, you could assign it from the edit menu, and then that would open up the preferences for you. All right, so we see Yazzie in, just says, Dear Greg, thank you so much. Possible if you could activate older versions. So I think that there's not going to be the possibility to activate 3-year-old software. You know, I think if you're doing a trial version, that's always going to be on the latest version. So, you know, think of it like buying a car. It's like if you're buying a car now, it's 2024. If you're to walk into a car dealership, say it's 2021, you know, so I don't think that the licenses are going to be activated for older versions. So I think that would have to probably do, like, you know, someone would have to do the design, make it work, do the testing, do quality assurance. So I don't think that effort is going to be put into so that you could run a 3-year-old trial version for it. Sorry about that. Okay. See, JVI needs to tickle his router as it's misbehaving. All right, so I know we had some questions that were mailed in. Let me get to some of those. Bear with me just for a second. All right, so we see from Frankie Rock, does Cubase 13 Pro have a pitch shifting / harmonizer plugin? Thanks for all the great Club Cubase videos. So there's no like real, like a real time, like you might expect from like maybe like a Digitech, a Vocalist type of device. But there are some other things that we could do as well. So we'll show you. Let me just look, see if I have this project open. All right, let me. All right, so let's say first off, let's create a chord track based on the piano events here. So I'll drag this up and we'll create our chord track. So let's take a look at what we could do with like the pitch correct plugin. We could do like under pitch shift. If we could just set this, I think this is kind of more for correction as opposed to all right, so just look at the key here. So we're in the key of G. So let's say we want so I guess you could utilize kind of like a vocoder to do this, like how we did it, you know, how we showed just earlier. But one of the great things is, you know, if we wanted to take this, you know, we can also just say, So let's say I want to take just this particular phrase. You can come over here to your project menu, or audio menu rather, and you'll see generate harmony voices. And we can say let's generate, and we could generate up to 4 harmony voices. I'll just do 2. So now as we do this, and those harmonies will be musically correct because it's kind of doing it based upon the chords from the chord track, which were derived from an audio or MIDI event that you could just kind of drag right in, and then you could edit all 3 of those parts simultaneously in the very audio editor. So if you wanted to switch back and forth between the different voices, you could do that as well. So you could edit the soprano, or you could edit that. So, or if you wanted to show them all and then just switch between the different voices as well. So it's not like a real time, but you could get great sounding vocal harmonies, but it's kind of more of an offline process for generating that. All right, question. What are the most common mistakes a producer has made when the vocalist says after the effects chain, I don't like this? Sometimes, I guess a common mistake, and this could be so much kind of psychology between the engineer, producer, and the artist. And sometimes, it used to be almost 3 different people, and often I realize that now it could be one person that is the engineer, producer, and artist. Or, so sometimes I've been in many sessions where the engineer and producer may kind of conspire to make the vocalist understand their thinking and decision, where the producer may say something and then the engineer may pipe in agreement and in support of the actual because often the producer is the boss in the session. They're the one that's paying the engineer and controlling the budget. So if the engineer doesn't like something, at that point you could, if the producer didn't like something, the engineer knew that they were getting paid by the producer and being hired by the producer, so they would tend to side with the producer. If the musician didn't like something, then there's always a great chance to explore to come up with something better. And unlike old days where people would spend lots of times patching in different, effects processing gear and, coming up with different creative chains, I think it's really great to be able to just, if you like a particular chain, to kind of start off and say, okay, I like this. And you could use mixed console snapshots. So when I'm kind of coming up with something, you can say, okay, I'm doing this. So you say, okay, I like this. I could take a snapshot of this. So we could take a snapshot, and snapshots won't involve audio, just like a picture doesn't include motion. But now at this point I could say, okay, I want to try something completely different. So I want to take this and I'm going to bypass the EQ, and I want to put the vocal chain in. So once we come over here, let's put on that warm tube voice. Okay, and this has a lot of processing on it, so we listen to this. All right, so I could take a different snapshot. So I'm going to come over here, boom, take a snapshot. And let's come up and just do a completely different idea. So at this point, we could just say, okay. I'll take a snapshot of this. So, and let's say you want to do something. All right, you want to do something. Let's put a destroyer on. Alright, so let's just come here. Alright, so we added grungealizer here to the vocal, take a snapshot. Alright, so we tried out like different ideas, and what we could do now is just to recall the different snapshots. So we could do this on just the selected track if we wanted to. So we could go to our and say we only want to recall this on the selected channels only. So everything else is completely intact. Like I said, okay, do you like options? So we built up chain 1. Do you like this snapshot? Do you like this one? And all these settings, you can just automatically switch back and forth between them. So if you could really just kind of get very creative, and since you could just switch those on the selected channel very easily, at that point, we're not going to, again, this is not taking automation account, but when you're kind of building the mix, at that point you could just try out different ideas, start from scratch, try different ideas, start from scratch, tear it all down. And sometimes the best thing you could do in a mix when it's kind of like 90% there and it's not working, and you're like, oh, what is it that's wrong? It's sometimes just take all the faders down, start over again. But this allows you to take a snapshot and you can say, oh, it was the keyboards that weren't working, but the drums, bass, and guitar are working in this. So now I could replace those keyboard tracks, but I could recall different stages as I was building the mix with my my mix console snapshots. So if you want to try to work with different, and the vocalist isn't happy, you could just save different scenarios and just quickly switch and let the vocalist choose. And I've seen a lot of times producers will, give two, like a classic producer engineer trick is to kind of, it's like, oh, do you like this one better or this one better? And they'll be the same. And the person will go, oh, I like A. It's definitely better. The first one, way better. And then they go, okay, this person is, they're not really hearing the differences. And they will set up, it's kind of like going to an eye exam. Which one looks better, this one or this one? And if you say A and you contradict it, and they pull up the same exact settings 2 questions later, they'll confirm and kind of go on from there. So, but having the ability to, if someone isn't happy with how everything is kind of built up, to save it, tear it all down, build it up again, try different ideas, and then you could say, okay, I like the EQs from this one, but the inserts from this and the sends from that. And then you could combine different takes with your mix console snapshots. So that's what I would do. All right, so we had another question: how to reverse the order of MIDI notes in the drum editor. Okay, so sometimes the pitch going up, the lower pitch in the drum editor could be at the top, and that could be like incongruent to some people. So if we wanted to reverse that, we'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we look at our drum editor. Here we see like, C1, C#1, D1. So while the pitch is increasing, going up in pitch. The drum editor is as the pitch increases, the pitch is going downward. So if we wanted to flip that, if we just click right here, we could reverse the drum sound list. So now we could have C1 at the bottom going up, C#1, D1, etc. So this would allow us to reverse the drum sound list. So you'll see this little icon right here, and here we could also show drum sounds only in use by the instrument, or so drum sounds only with the events, and then we could reverse if needed. Okay, question: how to approach backing up all of the audio files in lanes used for comps to pass on to users of other DAWs. Okay, so if we wanted to do this, what we could do is, let's say we have our file here. All right, so we look at, so often when we record audio that is stacked on top of itself, what we could do is we could view all these different stacks in lanes. All right, so, but you know, when we go to export our track, let's say if we did a batch export, this would only include the media that's on top of the track, and it's not going to give, if we're sending off the files to someone else for edits, it's not going to necessarily give those particular files, you know, the underlying files that may make up the edits or the other parts of the recordings. So if we wanted to take these lanes, these are individual files that are stacked on the same track, and if we wanted to take these and turn those into something that could be exported to pass on to other people, what we can do is we're going to select the particular lanes, right click, and then we could choose to create tracks from lanes. Once we do that, now we have audio tracks that are basically, when we look at this is all of our tracks, and the ones that were muted, we could unmute. And now all of the different vocal takes, for instance, or all of the different performances in a comp can be exported with all of the media that was captured, and then someone else could do edits if needed. So, but if you want to take the lanes and convert those particular lanes to individual tracks, right click, and we can say tracks from lanes. And then if I wanted to come over here, we could say, so just do that. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions that everyone has sent in. All right, so we have Vincent checking in. Thanks for joining us. All right, you see Gareth is checking out. All right, and Vincent's question is, does hidden minimized Cubase Windows plugin windows affect the CPU/GPU anything? So, you know, if the plugins are hidden or minimized, so if they're still doing processing, it's still going to take up CPU cycles, whether it's, you know, visible or not. So having the plugin open and visible, you know, is not going to necessarily affect the CPU performance. There could be, you know, if you have a badly written GPU driver, it could be like if the user interface is doing all sorts of, visual things that could affect the visual performance. But sometimes if the display driver isn't running correctly or isn't optimized for use in a DAW environment, then that could cause audio interruptions. So that could be something else that could have an impact. But generally, having the windows closed, won't have a significant impact on your, closed versus open won't have a significant impact on your particular audio performance. All right, so we see Mexstrat says play all tracks type of function mostly when it's distortion or effect based, when the notes interact in a certain way that cannot be replicated with multiple tracks or sending to a bus. So yeah, I'm not sure why it would be different, but if you haven't been able to get that, but it seems like it would be the same for that it's playing back the same. So if it's all going to a bus, that it should be identical. All right, see different discussion on UI design. So all right, so we see from Darren Flake, question, is it okay to leave the delay compensation active all the time while mixing? So yeah, certainly. So if this is what you mean by the delay compensation, so if once we turn on constrained delay compensation, that's going to bypass plugins that are causing latency, and it's kind of more for tracking and recording. Once you're mixing, you'd want to we could think of this as primarily for tracking, and once you're mixing, you want to make sure that that is disabled so that all of the plugins that you have in the project are being heard. So All right, so we have question, Link versus VCA fader. Does the VCA fader provide any function that Link does not do? All right, so the VCA fader is actually going to deal with automation. So let's go ahead and see if we still have that open. Just look for the project here quick. So for very simple things, like if you don't have automation linking into VCA, you could use them very similarly. So I'll just okay, so when we come here, let's just say Okay, so right now, you know, if we link all of our tracks, I could say, okay, we're going to link our tracks. And I'm just going to take off one element here in my, just to make it look a little more normal. I'll just remove this quickly. Okay, so if we are doing kind of a static setup, we could say, okay, I'm going to all right, so let's say we have these. So if they are static, I could do a link and all of them will move proportionally. And that's fine. But when we have automation going on, this is when it gets to be really bad. So if I have like some tracks are going up while other tracks are going down, if they're all linked, they're all going in the same motion. But now as I incorporate, let's say, a VCA fader to these, so now my VCA fader, as I bring my VCA fader, we can see tracks are, I'm bringing it down, and as I do that, it's also the tracks that are going upward are still going up, but they're being attenuated. And as I raise the VCA fader, tracks that are going down will still go down and be able to have those automations automatically coalesce between them. So if I write the automation on the drums here, so now when I come, all right, so I'm going to look at the automation, let's say on my sub kick, and we see that, oh, it looks like there's two different lines. So we see the automation on a track and the automation as the result of the VCA fader here. So when I go to the VCA, so we go to our VCA fader, we could now just kind of come over and say, okay, let's just grab this link, and I can now combine the automation of the VCA and a linked fader. So we have kind of the original automation here. We have the automation as the result of the VCA. So now I could combine those automations together. Now also where this makes a big difference is, let's say on my snare, I have a reverb as going to ascend. So I'm going to come over to the sends. We will add a reverb. So let's okay. So if I routed all these into a group, as I would bring down the snare track, if I bring down a group, the reverb, the amount of the snare going to the reverb would be changed. But here, when I adjust the VCA, we don't affect the gain structure of our snare going into the reverb send. So even a very quiet, because this isn't summing. So as I increase the VCA, it's not changing the gain structure of the track going into the sends. Whereas a group track would do that. So the VCAs are going to be working in conjunction with automation. That's something that a kind of a typical quick link won't do. So if I quick linked and I moved, all of the existing automation would be overwritten, whereas a VCA, when I link it via VCA, I could increase or decrease and still retain the different levels and contrary motion in automation on tracks with VCA, and it's not going to affect the gain structure on the mix console. All right, Vincent asks, question, I may have an idea why this is, but do you know the main reasons why Steinberg have implemented 4 mix consoles in Cubase? So, and this is kind of brought by, because we have composers that have, hundreds of different and thousands of tracks. I think it was Trevor Morris had asked about this when we did like a Cubase 10.5 or Cubase 11. We did kind of a walkthrough with him, and he's like, oh, I'd really love to have 4 mix consoles. And it could be that mix console 1 is set up for audio. Mix console 2 is set up for returns of virtual instruments. Mix console 3 could be groups and effects and VCAs. Mix console 4 could be virtual, other MIDI tracks and virtual instruments. So we wanted to give people, we had offered it in Nuendo so that people could have different types of tracks in different mix consoles. So that way, and a lot of our composer clients, felt that having, one for audio, one for instrument tracks, and one for like MIDI tracks going out to like a Vienna Ensemble Pro, and one for groups and effects, that they, really wanted 4 separate mixers. So we listened to the customers and added a 4th mixer in Cubase. Okay, so we see from Mexstrat just says, appreciate your responses. Yeah, so it seems to me that it would be exactly the same, if you have like a project that, where you could show that it sounds different, I'd be like really interested in seeing it. But if in essence, if it's treating all the audio going into like a group and you're putting effects on a group, it just seems like it's, but I'd be really interested to hear to see if you could show that it does make a difference sonically. Okay, Jazzy Lamel asks, hey Greg, can I sample my own drum kits in Groove Agent SE? And also, can I use my V drums to control Groove Agent? So yeah, so you could definitely, any audio file that is recorded on your system can be drag and dropped right into Cubase or directly into Groove Agent. So we'll show you that. All right, so let me just revert to this. Okay, so I'll open up, so any audio that's been recorded, so if you wanted to just, take samples from an audio file or drag and drop it, from Media Bay, so any files that are in, we could now come over and just say, okay, I'll cut the existing kit. So we'll just say, okay, and if we wanted to go to an audio file, so I want this vocal sample.
I started losing sight my place.
I wanted a drum loop. I wanted to take a loop from my Media Bay. So we could say, okay, just take a snare sample. Let me switch my preference back. So I wanted that sound. So anything that you want, you could just drag and drop, and you could have 32 samples per pad.
Started losing sight my place.
So very, very easy to kind of just drag and drop. If you have the full version of Groove Agent, one of the cool things that you could do is actually sidechain an audio input and sample into Groove Agent. So the full version will allow you to sidechain a source. So I could say, okay, I want to add a, so in this one is in absolute 6 or sold separately, but if we add an instrument track and we'll choose full Groove Agent, we'll come over here and let's go ahead and sample. So I want to take the vocal samples and we'll activate the sidechain input, and let's make it from the vocal. And then we could just say, okay, let's go ahead and record. And then you could just have the, have the sample directly and sample right into the particular pad. So you could just record right into Groove Agent. So, but other in Groove Agent SE, just kind of drag and drop. Now, when you want, and the other part of the question is, can we use like a Roland electronic kit to actually play these particular samples? So if you just click right here on the, if you go to like the instrument pad here, if you click in the lower left hand corner, you could go to your hardware controller setup, and I think you want to use eDrum controller 01, and I think that will work with your Roland kits. But anything that transmits Midi, you can just play and perform right in. All right, so we see feature requests. Can we have a fader when selecting the send level in a vertical, same as clip gain? Thanks. So it could be tricky. So I understand kind of the concept that you want to be able to come here and set the send level, kind of something similar to that. But a lot of times we're going to be doing it on the track level. And if we were doing something like this and we have 8 sends, let me know how you would envision seeing all 8 sends, like how you go from send 1 to send 7, using something like the clip gain. So if you could let me know that, I'd be happy to send it as a feature request. I like being able to access different things. I mean, I can see where this could be tied to automation of the send on a clip, but usually the send is not just for the clip, whereas the clip gain is for that specific clip, but the send is going to be at the track level. So, but let me know if how you would like to see all 8 sends displayed and reflected on a clip, and if this isn't like a terrible way of doing it. So I think for seeing all 8 sends, having them all visible right here at all times, is a manageable and reasonable thing. But let me know if you have any thoughts on that, and I'd be happy to pass it along. All right, Dennis LaCroix says, Greg, so there's really not an option in Cubase to make the text and icons look bigger. So, realize that it's going to be really set by your display resolution. So, and again, if you're on Windows, try the application scaling found in preferences. So, just like you see with other programs, your web browser, stuff like that, we can just simply adjust based upon your particular screen resolution, your display resolution. All right, so we see from Vincent, did not know that about the VCA fader. Thank you. All right. All right, I just want to talk. It says, hi Greg, in 13.021 used to change stuff that if I open a project and don't save it, the file get deleted. Really helpful when you just open a project just to play with the DAW. Why 13.03 changed? Okay. Okay, so I'll just come over here. So let's say I do new project. All right, and I'm just going to put it onto desktop here. And I'll do a new folder. We'll call it April 16th, 2024. Okay, so do this. Okay, so make sure I'm doing this right. Used to change stuff that if I open a project and I don't want it, I don't save it, the file get deleted. Really helpful if you use open a project just to play with .y. All right, so let me know if, I'm not sure if there's any changes with that, but check your preferences under general and see if you have auto save turned on. So let's say if I save this as April 16th, all right, and then when I go to add, I'll just add some loops and whatnot. All right, so I closed the project. We say don't save. Okay, I come over here. Let's open recent projects. We get to April 16th, activate it. And none of the content is there, so I didn't save after that. But I think check to make sure that you don't have auto save turned on, and that may do kind of what you're describing. So let me know if that. And he says, I just want to talk. Says, much love from Puerto Rico. Always loving your live stuff. Pretty helpful. All right, so we see Darren Flake. What's the cleanest way to gate vocals in Cubase? So I think, the standard noise gate works really well. So I think if you have a, just coming over here, we go to add an audio track, that if once we have this open, even just using the standard, just turning the gate on, the default controls for the noise gate in the channel strip, I think that's a super, just turn it on and it does, basically what you want a gate to do without any tweaking. So it's kind of really great default settings. All right, so we see discussion about smoking in England being maybe with barbecues in England being outlawed or something, from Michael Pierce. So you see from Darren Flake, I mean, you can press right click on the mouse, the fader appears in either the send or the clip gain. Doesn't have to be shown all the time, just by coming nearby there and clicking right mouse click. Sorry, this for the gain, or for setting the like a clip based effect send. So I understand it doesn't have to be visible all the time, but let me know how you would envision having 8 effect sends controllable from the clip gain. And if you think that if setting it in the clip gain, should it set the value for the track, or should that be an automatable event for the clip, and should be a different value before the clip and a different value after the clip, and what transition? So if we have values here and here, do you want a smooth transition or an abrupt transition? And for doing that and representing that for all 8 sends. All right, so you see just follow up from I just want to talk. So yes, see, as long as I don't add any audio file to the project, if I don't save it, everything gets deleted. I think that saved me time, but now I have to delete the file. It was only for playing with the DAW. All right, so let's say if I come here, I haven't changed anything. So if I add this sample and I close the project, it'll ask me, do you want to save the project? I'll say don't save, and here it says, do you create a new audio file? Since I have this set to automatically copy the files into the project, it says you've created audio files since the last time you saved the project. Do you want to delete these? And I would just choose delete, and then when I open up that project again, that particular file won't be there because I deleted it. So I don't think that behavior has changed. So we come look, and that file isn't in. So, but let me know if I'm doing something different than you. All right, so we see from AB says, hi Greg, I encounter a graphical glitch when I click and drag on the timeline in the edit window to zoom in and out. My audio events and text flickers and shakes. Any ideas? This is only in Cubase 13, so there's a lot of changes that were made initially, like from, that have been resolved in 13.03. There are a couple things depending upon your video card, and there are some different articles on the Steinberg website of how to mitigate some of the problems. I think a lot of it has been resolved in 13.03, but there's still some manual settings that you may have to make if you have like an NVIDIA display driver that you could search for. Let's see if we could just find them quickly here. Just so you see this graphical user interface. So you see you could try like this. You'll see these work around. So whether you have an NVIDIA or AMD GPU, so you could try these particular settings. So just do a search for graphical user interface errors, and then you could see like the little tweaks for manually setting stuff in your NVIDIA or AMD GPU based systems. So let me know if you tried that. All right, so we see from Naya 9, is there a shortcut to quickly show all content in the main window / piano roll? Like, I'm not sure if you want to, and give me like an FL Studio, so I don't run that, so I don't know, but if we want, so let's say if we have like, if you want to do like a piano roll, so let's say if we have, let me just see if I have this project I'm thinking of. So I'm not sure if you want to be like in the piano roll and see all the tracks there, or if you want it to be, so here's a way that you could see all of your tracks in, you know, the MIDI editor, or if you wanted it to be more of a zoom full, where you could see all the contents in time laid out for you there. So, but, you know, so that's how you could do it. So if you just, you know, are in them, you know, you could just come right there, and again, just do as, or if it's more of doing, you know, if we're zoomed in, you want to see all the tracks, all the contents, and you just do zoom full. And then you could, okay, so let me know if that makes sense for you, Naya 9. All right, so we see Darren Flake says, hi Greg, I think you misunderstand it. I think you mean that descends and the clip gain faders doesn't have any relationship to each other. It's just easier to pop up a fader when send or gain level. So if you just want it to, let's say if we're here and we go to our send, that you wanted this to be a pop-up fader as opposed to the send here. So let me know if that's what you want. So if you wanted this to be inverted vertically instead of horizontally for that. So, and I think in previous versions this was thinner, so it might have been more lines here. So let's say if we go to our sends, that this was maybe a thinner line like this in previous versions, and they made it larger so it's easier to grab in 13. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters dropping in to say hello and hitting like number 114. All right, Sable has been granted 1 gallon of Sprinter's ice cream. All right, so Naya9 says, yes, I mean, the zoom full option looks like you have to go through the menu. Thanks anyway. So I think there's keyboard shortcuts for it. So I think it's, let me just, we'll look at the key commands, I think. So you could just set a key command for it as well. So you don't have to go menu diving for it. All right, so I think I understood Darren's question about having to pop up on the pop-up fader right there, pressing the right click on top of Ascend. So but let me know, Darren, if you find this is too small or you just like a vertical, horizontal, you want more of a vertical control as opposed to being horizontal. All right. All right, looks like we may have a new soup recipe coming from Michael Pierce. A watercress soup. All right. See if there's any other questions that kind of pop in. If not, we'll wrap up just a little bit early. So once again, you can send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Appreciate everyone asking their questions today. One other question that was mailed in on is it better to export to 32-bit floating point or 24-bit fixed point? All right, so let's take a look at that. There's one question I forgot. All right, so let's take a small section of this project here. All right, so there's a lot of confusion. People always assume 32-bit floating point has more headroom, but what does that really mean? So we'll just do a quick export. I'm going to take all of my drums in this project and let's add too much gain on them. So I'm going to add it to a group channel to all my drums. And I will go to my clip gain here. All right, so we can see that my drums are probably clipping. So we added a lot of gain to it. So I'm going to export a quick mix down at 32-bit floating point and 24-bit fixed point. So we'll listen to it again here. All right, and I'll raise my master gain up here just for the sake of fun. All right, so now we're going to export this mix down as two different mix downs. So we're going to say, let's do our stereo mix. I'm going to create an audio track, and we're going to make this our 24-bit. All right, so this will be 24-bit fixed point, and we'll export the audio between the left and right locators, and let's do the same as a 32-bit floating point. So same file, same information, 32-bit floating point, export the audio. All right, so we have our two files here, which when we look at them, or I'm going to mute this because I don't want that in the other export. So we'll do our export audio mixdown. We're going to call this 32-bit. Okay, so we have our 24-bit, and so let's look at the actual audio files, and when we look at it, we can see that these will be clipping. Okay, and we'll just make each of these okay, so let's look at this. We're going to bring down the clip gain of this particular clip. Change the color of this. So okay, and you notice that as we bring the clip gain down and we zoom in, that we can see where the audio just kind of gets truncated right there. Now let's look at the same thing with our 32-bit floating point audio. I bring the gain down, and as we bring the gain down, we can bring it down enough that the top end of the audio isn't clipped. So this is why people will tell you that, you know, oh, like when you hear all these companies advertising for that they just discovered 32-bit floating point for handheld recorders, that it's impossible to clip. But now we can see that as we adjust the clip gain for this, when we bring it down, the audio is truncated and clipped off. But when we do our 32-bit floating point, that we could recover the audio and have it play back. Whereas this one, we can see will be clipped and truncated as a result. So that's why when you're doing your final export, it's always best to have a 32-bit floating point. All right. So Michael Pierce says, thank you, Greg. Great session as ever. So thanks for being on. All right, Tim K says, I bought Cubase Artist just about a month before the sale. If I'm lucky, I'll have the funds for the upgrade before the sale ends. That's great. See, Darren Flake says, thanks, Greg, for the hangout. All right, see, Pro Wash DFWs, got to make. All right, Capital Razor says, thanks, Greg. These classes are awesome. I've been watching for years. Thank you for the kind words. So Tim K says, wow. Tim K says 32-bit floating point. Yes, and as Jazz Dude mentions, don't confuse this with 32-bit and 64-bit plugins. Yeah, those are more memory addressing. All right, so we see Jazzy Lamel. Hey, Greg, can you share some of your past major recording sessions with different major artists, and how was Cubase performance? Which plugins did you use, virtual instruments, etc.? So when I was doing more audio recording engineering as before, I worked with Steinberg. So I used to work as an assistant at Unique Recording in New York City around 1992. And it was when computers were just doing Midi and couldn't really do more than 2 tracks of digital audio. So at the time when I was working there was doing like you could take your, you could take They had one editing room, a small like MIDI pre-production room. They wouldn't allow you to do vocals, but there they had a sound tool system, and that was a 2-track editor, so people could take a 2-track mix down recording, take it up there and do some edits digitally, as opposed to a razor blade at the time. So that's when I was doing my kind of recording engineer phase. But I've gotten to help tremendous amount of people. Like, I was an engineer on the Eric Clapton's Crossroads project in 2004, and that's a diamond certified. Like, you have gold and platinum certifications. That's a diamond certified video. So there we did, the whole festival was captured in Nuendo so we did 17 hours a day at 24-bit 96K, and this was 20 years ago, so that was a lot of data to record and push for a festival. So we're doing 48 tracks, 24-bit 96K, and just let the system record all day. But I've helped sessions for Paul McCartney. I helped Peter Frampton last night. I just got a message, an email from one of the guys in Maroon 5 who just, I saw a text pop in during the live stream. So I get to help lots of people. I've gotten to spend a lot of time with Stevie Wonder, working with him on stuff and his team, many film composers. I haven't seen Hans Zimmer in a while, but I always love going to work with him and his team. And I used to go out and spend a day just kind of working with those guys and helping out lots of different artists. So sometimes I will help out people that are super famous. I have no idea who they are, and then it's like, oh, it's that guy. So one time I shared a video with a friend of my son kind of criticizing music, and then he thought it was really funny because he did one of the tracks, and my son's like, oh, I hate this song, and it was just like such a genuine reaction. I didn't realize that he did the song. So but there's lots of people pushing the envelopes. There's a lot of like hip hop guys that use Cubase, the Teddy Rileys of the world, Daryl Pearson. If you look at, lots of people, and, like great, amazing guitar players. Like I've gotten to work with Eric Johnson and Alan Holdsworth. So lots of people just really kind of pushing the edge with Cubase all the time. All right. All right, so Naya9 says as long as you're not clipping, you're fine exporting in 24-bit. 32-bit float files are about 30% heavier, I think, and completely useless if you're not clipping, since Cubase runs in 32-bit float anyway. So it's really not that it's taking more CPU cycles. It's not necessarily heavier. It is more data. But if you think conceptually, if you've recorded at 24-bit and then you add effects to it, if you export at 24-bit, so you're already kind of at the maximum resolution when you record, and then when you add different effects to it, you want to not truncate the benefit of the addition of all of the processing. That's why you'd want to export a 32-bit floating point file. So if you were recording a 20-bit or 16-bit and then you're, processing and delivering a 24-bit resolution, then, that can make sense. But if you're recording a 24-bit and then you're adding processing, adding effects, adding automation, adding different mix elements, then you'd want to have all that information not degrade the original sonic integrity of the information. You'd want that information to have its own space in the mix, and that's why you want 32-bit floating point as opposed to 24-bit fixed. All right, great to see Val has just popped in at the end of the live stream from Vienna. Michael Team says, and Greg helps us too, so. Val says, thanks, Greg, for the Atmos mix setup guide here on YouTube. Helped a lot. So, all right, Michael Pierce says he's a 24-bit guy. His recording levels are in line with European TV levels at minus 23 LUFS. All right, he has so much headroom. Yeah, Michael Teen says a lot of K-pop artists are running Cubase. It's also a great point. All right, so Naya9 says, but even if you're adding processing to a 24-bit file, as long as you're not clipping to master, the audio won't truncate, right? So it's not necessarily truncating, but you may not get the benefit, the full benefit of what 32-bit floating point will offer you. So if you give it to, if you sent it to a Golden Ears mastering engineer, they would always want the 32-bit floating point file as opposed to a 24-bit fixed. So, all right, we'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Just one quick note, next Tuesday, I have to go out to our office. I'm going out to California. I'll be in meetings all day next Tuesday, so there won't be a live stream next Tuesday. We will pick up on our normal schedule on Friday. I get back Thursday night from my trip to California. So we will have our Friday live stream, but a week from today, there won't be a live stream. I just want to give everyone a quick heads up about that. Also, I want to thank everyone for taking time to learn more about Steinberg products in the live stream today, for taking time out of your busy morning, evening, afternoon, or wherever you're located. And if you have questions, please feel free to send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I appreciate everyone for making it such a wonderful community, and we will see if there's any more questions sneak in. See, Michael Graybill just says, learn a new thing every time. Thanks, Greg. And Michael Pierce just says, thank you, Greg. Have a great trip. So looking forward to seeing some of my colleagues in California. I haven't seen since NAMM show. Maybe see a friend or two while I'm out there. Michael Pierce wants people to slap the like button. All right. Okay, so I guess with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. See, John Koskinen says, very informative hangout. See, Tim K says he's still way early in his Cubase journey, but he knows he's in the right place. Well, we look forward to seeing many more live streams in the future. And it's great watching people grow in the live streams. All right, so I guess we are at the end of questions. With that, we will wrap up. Thanks, everyone, for all of the wonderful questions again. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. So everyone take care, and we'll see you Friday. Goodbye.